At this point, a lot of us have seen the pocket hole jig in action. We know that with the help of this tool, we can put together some pretty cool projects. If you're unfamiliar with it for whatever reason, I'll be sure to link a video in the description that'll show you all about it. But for now, we're going to focus on 3 unconventional uses for the pocket hole jig. And a huge shout out to Kreg Tool because they actually gave me a kit that I can send out to a random viewer. All you have to do is leave a comment. Alright, let's get started. Our first unconventional use is going to be precise doweling. You can use the drill bit that comes with the kit to drill a hole for your dowel. With this drill bit, you also have a stop collar. The collar is adjustable, which means you can select exactly how deep you want the drill bit to go. You can set this up as to where you drill about halfway into the wood, just so the screw has enough wood to hang on to, with the intention of later covering up that hole using a wooden dowel. This specific drill bit is great for this use case because of the sharp tip that it has. It makes it super easy to drill into the indicated markings with a perfect stopping point every time. Unlike what we see with a traditional drill bit, which doesn't have a stopping collar or a sharp tip. From here, it's pretty easy to add the dowels. Add some wood glue for strength, and then add your pocket hole screws. Screw them into place, and then grab your wood dowel and cover it with a bit of wood glue. You can then stick that into the hole you drilled, wipe off the excess glue, and use a flush trim saw to even it out. From there, it's a good idea to sand your boards down so that everything looks even and great. And once you stain your project, these doweled areas are actually a really nice detail, and a creative way to hide some of the screw holes. Now we're going to move on to use case number 2, which is easy shelving. I started off by marking the location of 2 studs, since this is all I need for my example. I normally use vertical pieces of tape because this is an easy way to mark where the stud is. In most cases, studs are about 16 inches apart. Be sure to factor this in when coming up with a size for your own shelf. I lined the shelf up evenly using the studs, and then marked the location of the stud using a marker. I grabbed both the pocket hole drill bit and guide, and then set them to the 3/4 of an inch setting. Then I drilled the pocket holes onto the marks I had left earlier. We really want to make sure that those marks line up with the studs so that the screws have something sturdy to hang on to. Then, using 80, 150, and 240 grit sandpaper, I sanded the board down so that it would have a nice and smooth finish. This part is optional, but if you want to change the look up a little bit, you can stain the wood too. You pretty much just have to cover the entire board in wood stain, and then wipe it off so that it's dry. It's a super quick process, and in a few minutes, you can have a usable shelf. From here, all that's left is the actual installation. The hard part was done, so all I had to do was line up the holes with the studs. And of course, drill them in, if you want to get technical. I left one side fairly loose, and this was intentional. Having this flexibility allows you to level the shelf easily. Once I made sure the shelf was level, I tightened up the screw on the right side, and then I went back and tightened the screw on the left side too, so that it would be really sturdy. And from the bottom, we can see where the screw is attached to the stud. And now you have a nice looking shelf that you can put some pretty cool decorations on. That said, we can jump into the third and final unconventional use for the pocket hole jig. Right now, you're seeing a few clamps on the screen. It took me a while to get my own because they're pretty expensive. Our third use for the pocket hole jig is a budget-friendly clamp. This only works in some cases, but let me explain with a couple of scrap pieces. Suppose you have 2 wooden boards, and you want to use these 2 boards to make a bigger board. You can use the pocket hole jig to pull these 2 boards together. We're going to make a pocket hole that corresponds with each of these arrows. Be sure to set the drill bit and guide to the size that corresponds with the boards that you're working with. Our final result should look something like this, which will allow us to drill in the screws in opposing directions. You can even add a little bit of wood glue just as extra reinforcement. After that, just make sure you line up your boards nicely and then screw them together. And when you turn it over, you're going to have a much larger usable board. My boards were a little warped from the start, but as long as you use good quality wood, you should be fine. I even used this method on the industrial shelves in my garage. On the opposite side, these boards are being held together by pocket hole screws. and it's holding up pretty well, especially considering the weight. If you've made it this far, I guess we can throw in another bonus use, and this would be the mitered corner clamp. I listed this as 3.5 because it's a little too similar to the last one, but it can still be very useful for things like picture frames. And as you can see, the logic goes without saying, but the alignment ends up really great on these, which is why I felt it's worth mentioning in the first place. As long as the screw hole is on the backside, no one would ever see it. Hopefully you learned something new from this video, but if you didn't, I'm forced to think that you're either really smart and/or creative. Either way, thanks a ton for watching.